Vince, what happened to the Pistons? What the hell was that?
The Detroit Pistons right now are one-dimensional.
So that's really the impediment to the Pistons' success.
Expose the exact point of where Detroit is in their evolution.
Sorry, the Pistons just aren't one of those teams.
To say that this is a crucial offseason for the Detroit Pistons would be quite a massive, colossal, Avengers-level understatement, which is crazy to say for a team that has one of the league's brightest young stars off a 60-win season, and overall on paper still scratching the surface of their potential. But then came April, and it all fell apart.
It's not that the result, meaning losing the series, was a disappointment. It's how they went out on your home court. In a game 7, down by damn near 40. That's the disappointment. That's where that comes in, because it reminded us of what their deficiencies are.
The 2026 playoffs did nothing but show that this team is still very far from where they want to go. It showed a team and franchise that was not at all equipped to succeed in the spotlight, and with the East only getting better, and freakier I should say. These championship windows, man, they close fast, and we've already seen how they can slam right in your face. Surprisingly, they entered the summer with more question marks than answers, between guys who look like franchise pillars, suddenly preferring the Sacramento Kings as an option, that's a new low, rumors firing everywhere basically solidifying nobody is safe, and everyone returning with some sort of uncertainty. Everyone, of course, outside of Cade Cunningham, and perhaps another guy.
It's the same preparation. Watch film, go through their plays, run through our plays. And what was the second part of the question?
Now I know what you're thinking. There's no way you're telling me the former third-string center, who came into last season just hoping to make the roster, is suddenly one of the safest pieces on a team with title dreams. But no, I'm not kidding. That's exactly what I'm saying. Because to understand the journey of the man they call B-Ball Paul in the Midtown, you have to be ready for the most unexpected. Just like he did to reach this level, and it all came together with one single tweet. Alright, so this is Paul Reed, and it's true. He did give himself the nickname B-Ball Paul in middle school, was a late blooming standout at a relatively smaller end, unknown college, and ultimately found himself with the 76ers as a 58th pick in the 2020 draft. And as if it was hard enough to make it out the mud as a near undrafted player, the Sixers, who at least in their minds felt like contenders, relegated Paul Reed to the minor league squad, where they didn't think it was anywhere ready as a prospect. So he spent a majority of that first season making the most of his opportunity in the G League, and proving to the front office it was not where he belonged, becoming the first player to win Rookie of the Year and MVP, which is something in the same conversation as Wilt, by the way. So yeah, pretty crazy. And even though Philly for the next few seasons kept doubting Reed, as they brought in different guys in theory to be the backup to future Hall of Famer Joel Embiid, Reed kept climbing and beat out backup after backup, showing every time he got the chance he definitely deserved a key spot in the rotation. Winning the hearts of fans, with his high motor and fearlessness, he always found a way to impact the matchup whenever he was a starter. Sure, he wasn't perfect, he was not the greatest decision maker, and his biggest knock was that he was too much of a wild card, often trying to do things outside of his role with irrational confidence. But one thing's for sure, anytime he was out there, he always did everything with 100% effort and proved by all metrics to be an elite backup big. Still though, the league was unconvinced he would stick around. Too small and undersized to be a consistent staple as a starter, and too unpredictable and chaotic to be relied off the bench. When his contract was up, he had just one total offer, which came from the Jazz, where they tried to lowball my boy with a 3-year deal that was non-guaranteed. And though Philly matched the contract to keep him around for another season, and this time with full commitment, making him the backup, where again he played well, like the great organization they are, the 76ers rewarded his play by waiving him to save money. And just like that, Reed was homeless.
Everybody on this team, it seems, has a nickname, whether it's Beef Stew right there or Deuce. But you're B-Ball Paul.
Yeah.
Who's the first person that ever called you that?
I was the first person to ever call myself that.
You gave yourself a nickname.
That was my Instagram name. Yeah. I changed my name from Amazing Paul to B-Ball Paul in like 7th grade, and I ain't ever looked back.
No team wanted to give him a chance, and Reed was just like one of us in this cook job market, putting his resume out there and hoping someone bid. In 2024, the Pistons were the only team willing, claiming him off waivers and giving him a minimum, and once again when given the chance, he played super well. However, the Pistons, like everyone else, still figured his high upside but also high mistake-prone game was a fluke, so they gave him another non-guaranteed. And of course with no options, he had to accept. And while I'm happy he got his bread and made sure his kids go to private school and all, from a basketball perspective, this was not that ideal. Paul joined an upcoming Pistons squad at the moment, where they just began revamping the entire organization and carving their identity as a big, strong, and physical overpowering team that above everything else didn't give a flying Basically a copy of the old days, and ahead of him were two other big men that were pillars of the style. The twin man-children, Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. The Pistons had committed to these guys as their core for what they wanted to be on both offense and defense. Duren the skilled bully who could pummel guys to the rim, and Stewart the all-worldly defensive presence that probably wanted to fight more than actually want to hoop. And with their physicality setting the tone for the rest of the team to follow, they were winning a lot of games, but Paul was the odd man out as a result. But like always though, when they did need him, he put up great numbers, and whether it be injury or suspension due to fighting, because yes, that happened all the time with these guys, Reed waited patiently and balled as a starter. The ultimate stay-ready guy he's been throughout his career. Statistically, there was not much of a drop-off when he had the chance to play, but he was a victim of an already established rotation, which, let's face it, if you win 60 games, it ain't broke, don't fix. A motto that held true throughout most of the season, up until, well, a couple months ago.
Up here, girl. Hey. Put it up there. The Pistons. Damn it, I don't give a damn what Vince was talking about. These people ready to stand on business. They the most physical team in the league. They have a guy that could be arguably in the conversation for one of the best players in the league in Cade Cunningham. They have an identity, and they have a grudge, they have a chip on their shoulder, and they're trying to wake up the world, let them know that they are here.
Come playoff time, the Pistons headed in as one of the favorites to come out the East, but immediately got hit with a very rude awakening. You see, Detroit dominated the regular season because they simply played harder than everyone else. But in the playoffs, everyone gives maximum effort, so their biggest advantage disappeared overnight, which is exactly what we saw in the first round against the Magic. A team that was dysfunctional, yet completely exposed Detroit's entire offense, and especially their bigs. Duren, who was feasting on layups and dunks against less physical opponents when the intensity was matched, and defenses actually made it a point of emphasis to either push him away or collapse in the paint. The further he had to shoot and rely on his touch, the less and less effective he became as a scorer. The Magic, who were just as big and strong, could not only predict what he was going to do because he really only had one move, which was running halfback dive. But everyone had scouted him, so even the help guys knew this was coming and can thus cheat over and try and make a play. Duren essentially never saw the secondary level defender, and this extra attention on him completely shut him down when the games were higher stakes and the spacing got tighter. His go-to moves were not as reliable anymore because defenses knew what to expect every time. The fancy dribbling he was getting away with against tanking teams, the shoulder to the chest that defenders didn't necessarily want to take in the regular season, that wasn't the case anymore. And as the Pistons barely snuck by the Magic, thanks to a horrific Game 6 choke, that, controversial opinion maybe, but one of the worst losses in the history of the league, it was not any different against the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Made their first three, then missed their next 7 from downtown before that Ellis make. Mobley with the great contest. Cunningham, the lob. Duren can't finish with those 4 fouls. Duren going at Mobley. Mobley with the rejection. Outside to Robinson, and he doesn't get it off in time.
Another team with size that game planned and crashed it on him and matched his strength. And if you're wondering why I haven't even mentioned Isaiah Stewart, well, he was completely unplayable, because if you thought Duren had no bag whatsoever, he looked like Hakeem in comparison to him. And even with a 2-0 series lead on the Cavs, the Pistons did not perform well to their standards at all, and it seemed very clear that they needed a spark. Their second best player was Tobias Harris, for crying out loud, and they continued to get absolutely nothing out of their big men production. So on May 8th, Baker's staff finally flipped the script. They needed energy. They needed someone who wasn't afraid of the moment, and Paul Reed must have known his number had finally been called, because that same day, one tweet changed everything.
And it is a massive Game 3 for the home team here in the land. The 4 seed in the East down 0-2 after 2 road losses to the #1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference, the Detroit Pistons. The Cavaliers need to defend their...
Paul sent a tweet saying, "Stay ready," the mantra that's defined his entire career, with Detroit finally ready to unleash him in search of answers. They had dabbled with him against Orlando here and there, but were still pretty reluctant to mess with the rotation. Yet even then, that irrational confidence that carried Reed throughout his career was very noticeable as it showed up in flashes. And sure, a lefty isolation hook shot isn't exactly what you draw up for a deep bench player, but this team had no juice. So Detroit finally decided, you know what, we need it.
President, we need a National Guard. We need as many men as you can spare because we are killing the Patriots. So call the dogs off. Send the National Guard, please. They need emergency help. Please help these folks.
After being a DMP healthy scratch in the first 2 games of the series and watching from the bench the guys ahead of him get exposed, in Game 3 got up off the couch like it was nothing and poured in a much needed 11 points, going perfect from the field and securing 3 rebounds in less than 10 minutes. He was the first guy down the floor and dominated the offensive glass and never looked intimidated, even pulling up for a turnaround jumper over the DPOY. The truth is the Pistons needed more skill in the core, and Reed out of all their big men had the most touch around the rim, so gave the offense something that Duren and Stewart couldn't. This showing earned him more trust in the next game, as Reed not only played more minutes in this one, and still provided a major spark doing the same stuff. 15 points on 7 for 9 shooting, in still limited time, he had fully surpassed Stewart and ate into the minutes of their all-star big men. I mean, look at some of these shots, going right at Jared Allen and Evan Mobley like they were practice dummies. The exact same front court that made Duren wet his pants. Paul Reed had no fear, and the skill around the rim made him a problem for the Cavs. They couldn't predict his moves because honestly, they didn't know what he was going to do, and his wildcard nature that teams stayed away from, on top of the energy he brought every game, proved to the staff that he needed more run.
The mindset tonight coming into the third quarter, obviously seeing what the Cavs were on that run going into it?
Same mindset I have all the time. You know, go out there, try to help my team win, do whatever is needed. Yeah, that was what I was thinking about.
However, with the 2-2 series and the season at risk, the Pistons pulled off one of the strangest moves we've ever seen, where, for some unknown reason, in the first half they resorted back to the old rotation, as he didn't play at all, and once again Duren and Stewart did nothing, chilling on the bench as the fourth quarter came around and JB looked up and was still a very close game. Enough was enough. He finally called on his secret weapon, and not only did Reed play, but Reed ended up playing the entire fourth quarter and overtime in the biggest game of the season, still providing the same offensive spark as always, but this time his energy on defense was key. One play was stopping Harden in isolation by himself, the next play would do the same thing with Mitchell, and the rotations he was making were pinpoint accurate, forcing all the Cavs into much harder shots. Part of it is definitely his defensive awareness, but most of it is effort. Just like this play, where even though he does get blocked, he sprints all the way back, and never gives up as he chases down the ball, and is rewarded by forcing a really big turnover. Reed impacted the game in such a short stint in so many ways, and despite Detroit losing, it's safe to say he was the reason it was close.
JB, we didn't see Paul Reed there till the fourth quarter, and then he played out the rest of the game. Just what we're seeing from JD and Stu that made the decision of putting.
Again, I just thought P. Reed gives us that spark. He's always ready when the moment calls for it. Through that point, I thought we had done a pretty good job. They made their run, and P. Reed is, a run stopper for us. So having him as a weapon is good for this team.
And finally, as we head into a do-or-die Game 6, in very Paul Reed fashion, he had his best game of the series and made sure the Pistons weren't going home that day. 17 very efficient points off the bench, and once again Cleveland had no answer for him. It's certainly not easy to have your minutes fluctuate every night and still be expected to produce at a high level, but Reed has built his career on staying ready. He's the ultimate spark plug who always seems to find a way, again giving something that the other guys couldn't.
3 over Strus. Reed had it, tried to save it. Robinson out of bounds, reeled in. Thompson has it. Pistons control. Reed tries hard, burging, and scoring.
We need to go back to this play.
Holy smokes!
We have got to go back to this play right here because this is a micro.
But then, after helping save Detroit's season, the Pistons again, they just shot themselves in the foot. In Game 7, Reed played just 8 minutes for reasons that still don't make sense on their way to getting absolutely blown out at home, sending the whole team to an existential crisis. More than anything, the 2026 playoffs served as a wake-up call for the Pistons, realizing that sure, the regular season you can get away and even dominate with that physical sheer style of hoops, but when the calendar hits April, you need actual skill, and more importantly, you need confidence. Those guys who can win when the spacing gets smaller are the guys you want to roll into the playoffs on your side. Paul's story showed him that, and as a result, they traded Isaiah Stewart as a vote of confidence to be the backup at least, went out and made moves with the emphasis of adding more skill on the roster, and seemed somewhat comfortable dangling their star player because they know they have a guy right behind him who's good. But not only was he a story, he also finally earned himself a real NBA home with the writing on the wall saying they won't make the same mistake again in Game 7. Everything up to this point was not a fluke, and Reed had finally figured out what his role was in the league, and it was all because his whole life